All right. Welcome back to the Strong and Simple podcast, everybody. This is one of your hosts, Marissa, and I'm here with the other host, Michelle.
Hello, everybody.
And we have a special guest for a super nerdy conversation today, and we're really excited about it. So I would love to welcome Amanda Goedde. A little intro for Amanda. Amanda is a movement leader on the North Shore of Massachusetts and a cybersecurity professional. Over the last 10 years, Amanda has been repeating the mantra of it's not if, it's when, regardless if she's writing an industry-leading security paper or coaching a CrossFit class. Her goal is to make movement and security more accessible and approachable. We're all about accessibility and approachability. So Amanda, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yay. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yay. Awesome. So, give us, let's just start out with like a little introduction to you. How did you get to where you are?
How did I get to where I am? I find it it was a happenstance. It was a lot of falling forward type of situation.
Okay.
I found security by way of social media marketing, which I found by way of journalism, right? So I went to school for journalism, and Sally Mae came a knocking, and so I had to find a better job that was able to let me pay the piper here. And I ended up at a company that did cybersecurity as one of their like offshoots. And I was hired originally to help start their social media programming, and learned a little bit about it, like a very top level, like not really fully understanding. There was a lot of acronyms and a lot of industry lingo. It wasn't approachable at all. And I was like, I am just not smart enough to do this. So I left and kind of went around to a couple different startups. And then I actually went back to that company because they were looking for someone who was able to take complicated, large conversations in the security world and boil it down to something that was understandable. And I had kind of proven myself to do that already by doing it for social media. I was one of the only people that read this report and was able to make tweets out of it. So they're like, great, you already kind of know the deal. Let's go.
Cool.
So I dove into the cybersecurity realm there, and it's been a really interesting journey just because no matter how long someone is in cybersecurity, very rarely you will hear someone say that they're an expert because things continuously change. So even like you'll hear industry leader a lot, or like pillar of the community for people who have been in the industry for like 20 plus years. But no one claims that they're kind of the expert, because at the drop of a dime, something can change. And we're all constantly playing catch up or trying to like find the puzzle piece that needs to happen here before something else falls on the other side. So that, and then I guess the flip side of that for kind of the fitness and wellness world, I found that by way of blogging, right? I was wanting to get myself healthier. I was broke. So it started off as a blog for me kind of running around the neighborhood and like keeping myself accountable, being like, ran 2 blocks today. Great. It was a Tumblr account, like back when Tumblr was a thing. And like it just slowly kind of grew and grew. And I was asked to speak in 2015 at a conference in LA on building an authentic following a blog community. And I remember going to that, and I was one of the only people who wasn't an instructor or someone active in the fitness world. And everyone was so welcoming, and everyone was just so like, it was such a cool community that I was like, I'm going to be a part of this. I don't know how I'm going to be a part of this. I'm going to be a part of this. And here we are.
Yay.
Awesome. So I find the intersection of what you do so interesting. And since you've been sharing more on the cybersecurity thing, I'm like, ooh, tell me more. It's one of those things I feel like it pops up and down on people's radars. Like something really bad happens and then everybody's concerned about their cybersecurity and then they forget about it.
Exactly. And it's also because like we're connected on everything, right? We're doing something on a cloud platform here, like we're on Instagram, we're on all these things, and we're basically bartering ourselves in exchange for something of value, right? We're like, okay, well, on Instagram, I'm going to post a photo of myself with my face and where I am in exchange for quote unquote engagement, whether or not
Mm.
that's a like, a comment, a conversation that happens. And we basically become very used to handing over our data for
Mm.
like a quick hit of serotonin, being like,
Yeah.
yes, got it. I got the funky
Yeah.
face filter. Like, I don't care what they do with that data, but look at my
Mm.
boho chic 2022 sparkle face. Like,
Sparkle face.
It's so true though. It's like I had to give them my social security number to get it, but it was so worth it.
it's so worth it.
So
It's interesting
true.
because like that's how we use things, right? And
Mhm.
like going back into the history of the internet, like the internet was never meant to be used the way that we use it.
No, God,
Like
no.
the internet was never meant for anything to be private. It was never meant to have privacy built into it. It was a
Mm.
method of communication, just like a landline phone. Like
Yeah.
never there was never the thought when a landline was there that like your conversation's private. There was always that like, oh well, someone has to like connect it somewhere and like they might not be listening, but it could be listening, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas now we're like, well, of course, what do you mean it's not private?
Right. Like, where did this expectation even come from? Like, I don't.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because people always are very surprised when something comes out about like an update. I don't know, what was it, like 6 months ago, Instagram or Facebook did like another, we might do this with your data,
Right.
sort of privacy update notice, and everybody freaked out. And I was like, what do you think they've been doing with your information all of this time? Why do you think
Right.
your phone knows to show you yoga mats after
Anything.
you were talking with your friend about yoga mats?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's like our data is the commodity, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're not paying a subscription service, like Facebook is going to find a way to make money somewhere else. And so they're selling all of these data points that you're willingly giving up and being like, oh, hey, you have a shoe business. Here is a person who might be interested in your high heels that lives within 100-mile radius of you that has been searching for blah, 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 blah. Like there are pros and cons to the technology. And I think the biggest thing is that people just aren't aware of it. And so when they're like jolted away being like, oh, you're doing what? Like you can't take my photos of me and my bestie and like try to use it against me. And Facebook is like, well,
You said we
you kind of
could.
signed up for it when you signed our terms and conditions.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fascinating to go back and read those terms and conditions. They're always there, like at the bottom, the footer of those websites. And
Yeah.
like literally everything you upload to those platforms, there is fair game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They basically own it. It's like,
Right.
yeah. So I realized I didn't actually introduce what the actual topic of this episode was. So for folks
Can
listening,
anybody
thinking,
guess?
I know they're like, "What the hell? This isn't the podcast I thought I was going to listen to." We're here to talk cybersecurity and fitness tracking apps. That's the that's the little the link to our typical podcast theme. So trying to get to that, right? You know, when I feel like there are so many apps now where, you know, you go and you create an account and it gives you the option of just signing in through Facebook. And so many people are like, well, hell yeah, like I'm already signed into that. So I'll just click it and it's super easy. And it's like, you just linked the like master data thief to now your physical wellness information, you know?
Right. And I think it's something, again, like there's that trade-off between like what's easy and what like is probably adding an extra barrier of entry. But like what you just said, when you connect all the dots together with what you're sharing and then something that is tracking your well-being, whether it's a Whoop, MyFitnessPal, whatever, Nike, like any of these, you're adding another data point both ways, right?
Yeah.
And the more information that you connect back to yourself, when information of yours does get leaked, the greater the opportunity it is for someone to put those pieces of the puzzle together on you
Yeah.
and be able to then pretend to be you online. Because once they have your name, once they have your address and your email address, because I applied to colleges in 2005. So my social security number has been out on whatever big thing since like the UC system got hacked back in the early 2000s for social securities. So there's some of that that's already residual in there, right? So then if I go ahead and link a fitness app that is then tracking where I'm running, and that fitness app gets hacked, and now that person's like, oh, well, every morning at so-and-so time and so-and-so time, she runs this route. I can say this is probably where she lives and knowing, okay, here are the houses is it a busy road? Is it not a busy road? And again, that doesn't mean that someone is going to act like nefariously on that information, but it's being cognizant that that information is being collected and stored somewhere, which people might not realize. They're like, oh, cool, here's my run map. Check out, like, I ran X amount of miles today.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like one of the things that people often say, whether it's because they don't want to think about the threat that's out there, or maybe they are actually ignorant of it, is like, oh, nobody would actually want to look at my data. Like, who's actually able to piece that together? Are there like actors just like building profiles of random people on the dark web?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. With like 1,000% certainty. And they're not just like individual peoples. These are individual people who have built algorithms and computer systems to literally scrape lists. So from vulnerabilities or from kind of, what do you call them? The name is escaping me. When there's a breach, there it is. Like, for example, when like LastPass had a breach recently, which was a breach that wasn't a breach, right? Because LastPass does a whole bunch of different encryption. So they never store your actual password. They store an encrypted version of your password. But so all of these things, when they get breached and the threat actor's like, haha, I got all the data, they get posted on basically like a Craigslist of the dark web. This is now super valuable information. So as people continue to build their quote unquote like black hat street cred, they're building these matrices together, and they're like, okay, well, I have a Google breach document here that has 3 million people's name, email, and that password that was breached at one point. Now I have a Twitter breach, and so I'm going to try to find the connecting points here. I'm going to find these connecting points here. And the more and more fields that they're able to collect on these people, the easier they are to sell. Because if you're like, hey, criminal, I've got a 35-year-old married woman who lives in Massachusetts, and I have everything about her. Here's a photo of her. Go and pretend to be her online. And there's nothing there that stops them, because we willingly give out so much of that information. And like, there are terrible people on the internet. And I joke with a lot of my clients that I end up seeing in yoga or CrossFit class, because they're always like, you're always here and it's always so great. And I'm like, yeah, I see a lot of terrible shit online. And this is like my connection back to humanity, that like there are good people in the world. But yeah, it's just like if you worked at a marketing agency, right? And you have like a buyer persona. That is exactly what they're creating, except they're able to get super specific, because all of these breaches, once that data is out and like lost, quote unquote, like these companies can continue to build locks and better security devices around the data they're collecting. But that whole chunk is gone. And is floating on the internet somewhere in some guy's basement, and probably multiple people's basements at this point, waiting to basically be like plucked up. So yes, the person probably who's like, no one is interested in my data, probably has some truth in it, because like people are looking for those valuable data set, that valuable persona that's going to allow them to rent the expensive car or take out a fraudulent loan type of thing.
Yeah.
But there's still the opportunity and still the chance.
Damn.
So what are people doing once they build a persona?
They sell them. It is literally like a Craigslist market, and they'll sell them either individually or by lists, because what can happen also is that, let's say I'll use myself for example, like Amanda Goedde, here's my email address, here's all this, and here are 3 passwords that have been found on a breach somewhere, right? They will go and take my email address and rotate through those passwords and iterations of those passwords, which is why a lot of security professionals are like, don't just change the number at the end, or don't swap out the A for a 4, because they can run scripts super fast to see if that works. Yeah. And then once they get into your bank account, once they get into your utility bill, once they get into your mortgage, like things can happen really fast and it looks legitimate. And that's the biggest problem, especially when it comes to like banks that are insured, right? So you'd be like, oh yeah, that wasn't me that did that. And they're like, okay, well, they logged in with your credentials. Like, how are we supposed to know that it wasn't you? So it's a larger opening to something that can spiral really fast. And that doesn't really have a really great resolution to it yet, because anytime that there is a resolution, these people they're criminals, right? So they're looking for the next hole that they can put into the boat to be like, oh, I'm gonna get in here. And so like it's a very scary world once you're like, oh man, like there's a lot of my information out there. And a lot of times we'll see this happening, especially through credit card fraud, right? And this is one of the ways that like it's really easy to catch, because like your credit card company knows your habits. And so they're like, you probably didn't rent a $10,000 Lamborghini, correct? And they flag that for you. So it's things like that to be aware of, that there are really easy ways to get in, and make sure you use a strong password.
So it's like once your stuff is out there, it's like letting go of a balloon. Like it's gone. It's gone.
Like maybe you can find like some of the like popped pieces like thousands of miles away, but a lot of it's out there. And a lot of that is what we're seeing with social media, right? We don't know the longevity of what Facebook's data retention for all of our stuff is going to be, right? We almost find that with like MySpace, right? When the teenage dirtbag theme came back on,
like, where are my pictures?
Oh my God, where are my photos from MySpace? Like they're out there somewhere, because things don't just disappear, but we can't access them anymore. And so that is one of those things that we have to be aware that once a platform gets deplatformed, like that doesn't mean that data just vanishes. So
damn,
that's a good point. Oh geez,
I know.
And it's things with like
I'm trying to remember what was on my MySpace.
Part of me is like glad that I can't find it. I'm like, I'm morbidly curious, but then I'm like, oh no, maybe we just let MySpace die.
We'll just let that die. We'll leave
it. Thanks, Justin, for throwing that down the tube there.
Seriously. Oh God.
But like the implications when there's like fitness data, right? Or health data, especially if you're using a tracker that is tracking your like oxygen levels or your heart rate or your menstrual cycle. Like there's a lot of data that is highly personal that can be used in a way, not like a great way, right? Like if someone knows that you have a medical issue and they're able to get confirmation through a breach at some sort of fitness tracker device company, like that opens up a whole new world, especially since like the healthcare and like healthcare security is like woefully not great.
That's
Mm.
So
great.
anything
That's awesome.
That's really
anything
good to know.
that like do with a lot of those personal pieces that, again, while they're beneficial to us and we get a lot of information out of having a tracker on us, we don't necessarily think about what that company is doing to help protect that information that they now have.
Yeah. Man,
I
there's
think
like
this came up. I think this came up pretty, clearly with, the overturning of Roe v. Wade and
Right.
many states kind of falling in line with what they had planned for when that was overturned. And and I know that I had heard about one case where somebody's data was Facebook or whoever complied. I'm sorry if it wasn't
Right.
Facebook, but
It's okay, you didn't
complied
call it
with
Meta.
like state agencies like
Right.
to confirm that this person had had an abortion
Right.
or was pregnant and is now no longer pregnant. So
Right.
what does that mean?
Yep.
So what are the like legal implications for social media companies in terms of when the government or law officials are requesting information about people? Like how does that legally
That's a
work?
really good question. I am not a lawyer, but I
Mm.
do know that especially a lot of things around data privacy is very much the Wild West in the United States, especially. So in Europe, they have a very stringent data privacy law that went into effect a few years ago. It's the GDPR, I believe. I believe those letters are in the right order there.
I think that's right.
And for example, like if you visit almost any website that is going to track you, you have to accept the cookies on it in a very large thing there. And they are basically saying that any time that they are going to be taking data from you, you have to be aware of it.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in the United States. And so the gray zone, especially with things like Facebook, and I believe it was Facebook in this instance, they sent their messenger data,
Yes.
is to assume that the company is going to comply with a federal subpoena or a state subpoena.
Yeah.
There is no laws really protecting your online data other than the fact that you sign the company's terms and conditions. And most of those terms and conditions are for the benefit of the company.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be surprised that after Roe v. Wade and in the coming months, we'll see a lot more updated terms and services coming out. I know Twitter just recently did one, and I'm sure they'll start updating slowly, making sure that they're covering their butts, basically. And that's kind of the scary thing, right? You have all of these people that are like, oh, well, I'll use Signal or I'll use this alternative one. I'll use this. This is encrypted. It doesn't matter if it's encrypted or not. If that company gets a subpoena, they're going to tell the law what is happening.
Yeah.
And they are not required to keep your data private from a federal agency or a state agency. Whether the company decides to take a stand on it is a very like company by company time. And I, especially with the Roe v. Wade kind of dust starting to settle, I have seen less and less companies saying anything about it. I know in the first aftermath, lots of fitness companies were like, well, your data's safe with us. And people would ask, what will you do if you get subpoenaed? And there wouldn't ever be an answer to that. And I think that is the answer to that question. I think we have to start being advocates for our own data, and for things that we want to keep private, we have to keep them private. Whether it's like in a notebook, right? We all like, I remember as a kid when you're learning about your period, it was like an actual calendar and you put a little like red dot, like things like that. Keep your information safe, because even like if I had a like calendar back here, chances are you wouldn't be able to see it through the resolution of a camera, right?
Yeah.
So there's some pros and cons to being super highly connected.
Absolutely. Definitely. And I feel like even if companies say, yeah, we'll keep your data safe or whatever, still, I would say take it with a grain of salt. I mean, there was one period tracker app, I forget the name of it, but they like made a statement after Roe v. Wade that, we won't give out your data, and then literally gave it out like 2 days later. Like literally just went right back on it.
Right. Right.
They're in it to keep themselves going, protect
Right.
their asses, keep making money. And yeah, it's so scary how little we know of like what they're doing with our data. I mean, like
Right.
the Weight Watchers Curbo app just had to pay out over $1 million because they were illegally collecting health data on minors.
Right.
Like,
Gross.
the fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like fitness tracking apps, which so many of us use, right? Whether it's logging your food or your fitness or whatever, like MyFitnessPal is one that like so many people
Mhm.
use.
Mm-hmm.
What are the specific security risks with those types of apps?
I think the risks with those types of apps, again, are like if you're uploading anything that is highly personal and identifiable to you, right? So if you have a chronic illness and you are logging about an incident with that or an appointment that you had, things like that can be then tied to you, that's something that it feels kind of like terrible to say, but like don't log that in the app.
Yeah.
Log that in a notebook, even if you need to put like a little reminder in there being like check page blank of notebook here for more details. Things like your run routes and making sure that those apps in general are set to private. I know that things like Fitbit and MyFitnessPal really thrive off of the like community connection onto it. But again, any of those types of extra connections can lead to like a break in the system. And it could also be that, like, I know on Facebook this happened a couple of times where I'm like, I thought I was friends with that person already, but I guess I'm not. And it's just someone else trying to pretend to be that person, right? So trying to keep those privacy settings to their highest kind of keeps your information safer from getting out, kind of from the get-go, but making sure that you're keeping like your address, your like run routes, things like that, super private. I always post kind of where I work out because to me, I'm like, there's one gym in the town that I live in. Yes, I go work out there. Quick Google search could like let you get on that.
Yeah.
But things like that, depending on if you're in a larger city or in a highly populated area, like just be aware of what you're logging. And if you would want someone to know that you are there, if they don't know who you are, right? So if like you are, going to a yoga studio in New York City, for example, and you're like, oh, I'm going to blank here. And then all of a sudden someone comes into class after you and you're like, oh, I came here because I saw your post. Like, how does that make you feel? If it makes you feel weird, maybe we don't do that. If you're like, sweet, new people to meet, that's fine. It's just understanding that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wasn't when Kim Kardashian was robbed in Paris, wasn't that because of a geolocation that she had set?
She shared everything. And that's what, like, they had an interviewer with the robber. And he was like, I knew exactly where she was at every waking moment because she was telling me where she was.
Piece of cake.
And that's why, exactly, right? He was like, I knew she was going to be alone. I knew, like, she had this diamond on her because she was all blinged out. Like, I could get in. So I did. And
it's like she invited it. Like, hey, come on in.
Which is why, like, when the whole location services thing, like, blew up 3 weeks ago or however many weeks ago.
Yeah.
I'm like, this has been a thing for years, guys.
Yeah.
Like, this didn't just happen. And we all had a really terrible kind of collective witness moment to this, where like, regardless of what you think of Kim Kardashian or any celebrity, like that's a traumatic experience,
Yep.
and that could have been anyone.
Yeah.
Because we're always like, oh, look here, I'm having beers at blank, or I'm here doing this.
Yep.
It only takes one person with bad intentions to ruin your life. And if it wasn't a celebrity like Kim Kardashian, who knows what would have happened to another person in that situation? Like, it's one of those things that we just have to understand the risk that comes with telling our information or putting our information out there, regardless of whether it's a location service or your face or your run route or what you do as your workout in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in thinking about, you know, they always say, you know, if you're going to post your location, do it after you've left the location. Right. So, you know, for straight up security, that kind of thing. But, you know, if it's your run route, right, not only are they figuring out what your route is, they're figuring out your routine.
Correct.
It's so much easier to become a victim. You know, you're literally helping someone track you.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's awful to like have to think about that, but that's the reality that we're in, right? Like, I would love to wake up in a day and be like, I can post wherever the hell I'm going because I know that no one is going to mess with me. But we are like light years beyond that point. We are not even close to getting there.
Yeah.
And so being proactive with that is nothing to like be ashamed of, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times people are like, oh, well, you're just paranoid or no one's tracking me. And like, it could be that no one is, but on the off chance that someone is, like, and there's now like, you can track where people are like through your iPhones. I had not seen this until I was in Spain and someone was like, oh, I can show you where so-and-so is. And I was like, oh my God. What? And like, that's a reality, right? I don't have it on my phone. I'm surprised I had turned it off because I didn't know it existed. I must have just disabled the whole thing a while ago. But I was shocked. And she was like, well, now I know where they are. So we can go meet up with them later. And I was like, oh, I'm
you
like,
could have texted them.
This, like, usually I'm like, hey, how far away are you? Or I'm here. What? Like, you know, and it was funny after that happened, I started seeing TikToks about like, oh, when my husband's out and I get bored, I'm just gonna go and bloop 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 and like see where he is. I'm like, that's creepy. Like we should not be normalizing this.
That's
guys.
not healthy relationship behavior at all.
No. And it was so interesting to me to see that this type of behavior, especially through like those TikToks, that like it's considered funny to an extent, and then like when someone does it to you, it's creepy. So like where are we as like a society okay with kind of where our lines of privacy are blurred, right? Like, is it funny haha right here, or are we doing that like funny weird thing over here?
Crossing the line. Yeah. Do you remember when it had to have been like, I don't know, like 2012, 2013 or something like that, when Facebook would give you an alert when a friend, someone from your friend list was nearby, and it'd be like, Amanda Goedde and 3 others are nearby, and you'd literally get like an alert on your. That was weird. That was a weird time, and I like forgot about it until right now. I remember like being at a bar and getting an alert that some friends were nearby.
And it's funny because like this has been done time and time again, and I feel like we have just, like you just said, like we forget about it, right? We forget about the weird, like, oh, that's right. With COVID, right? With the location services, like our phone was constantly in the background being like, were you exposed? Who were you with? Like this person now tested positive. So now you get an alert.
Yep.
And at that point that was considered handy. Whereas when you look at how it's getting the data from you, like it's triangulating who you were with down to the moment that you were there with them.
Yeah.
To be like, hey, we know you were with this person. Thanks.
Yeah.
Regardless of like the outcome for it. Which is one of those things where like, are we willing to to give up privacy for betterment of community? And is that a trade-off for our data security, which is fine? And then over here, we have our like data security and privacy for like engagement on social media.
Mhm.
And all of this is like a big risk management, like seesaw, right?
Yeah.
Like, where are my risks and benefits going to go if I share a little more here and not a lot here
Mhm.
versus the other way around?
Yeah, absolutely. It also
Yeah.
makes me like, I'm thinking about wearables now, right? Like, you know, your Fitbits, your Garmin,
Right.
whatever it is, right? Like we think of those like, oh, they're just tracking how many steps I've done or whatnot. But like they need GPS. They need to know your location to know how many steps you've done, right? You know, the
Right.
more advanced ones, not just
The
like fancy
mileage,
pedometer.
like even, yeah.
Yeah. So like, and you can't turn off that option, right? That's not like your social media settings.
No.
And then you link it to an app. So we're
You
like
link
that
it to
much
an app that's on your
Yeah.
phone that is talking about your location from your phone to the app and being able to be stored in both places. And there's a lot. I personally have stopped. I loved wearing the wearable that I was wearing, and I stopped wearing the wearable in the aftermath of Roe v. Wade. And also, like, it was a whole bunch of different things, but that was kind of like the nail in the coffin. I was like, you know, I've learned a lot from this wearable. I know when I need to rest, and I know how it feels when I feel good, and I know how it feels when I feel terrible. So now I do not need to rely on an app to be like, homegirl, you need a rest day.
Right.
I am now fully confident and trusting myself to be like, you need a rest day, lady. Everything hurts. Don't go.
Right.
And it's been funny how like overall my well-being has shifted to a way where I'm like, oh, okay, like I don't have to have my app on me, or I don't have to have this thing on my wrist. And I don't have to worry about like if someone gets that data.
Yeah.
And whether it was like the menstrual tracking or my heart rate tracking or whatever, like it's just one other thing that I'm like, you know, like we're fine. I'm
Yeah.
not like a competitive athlete. I don't need to know like how high my heart rate goes during a workout to see if I'm like getting my like VO2 max. Like we're not going there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a point of data that a lot of people don't consider because they're like, oh, well, it's helping me stay active. And it is. And also like that data is going somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the part where I think a lot of people just don't necessarily think about, right? They're like, oh, well, it goes onto my app. Obviously, it goes onto whatever this thing is. Yeah.
Yep.
But that app is managed by someone else and gets
Yep.
stored somewhere else.
It's kind of amazing that anybody can get away with a crime now, right? Like if
because we're all being tracked.
I mean,
yes.
I suppose there are some smart people who go to commit a crime and they're like, I should make sure I take all these things off and like maybe I don't take my phone with me. But also I feel like not everybody's that smart. So
well, those are the ones that get caught, right?
but are they?
I don't know.
I'm not saying that I want, you know,
yeah, you're
enforcement
aiding and abetting right now.
but it's just like kind of amazing that it's with the amount of stuff that can be learned about you and like the whole COVID tracking. When we were in Puerto Rico in February, it was like required. You didn't like you had to opt into it, and every day they were like, are you positive or are you negative? And where were you today? And you had to do like this whole questionnaire and everything. And at one point I was like, and then when we got back here to Boston, I was like, still getting the alerts. And I'm like, I am not here anymore. Like, we're fine. We're not here anymore. But yeah, that whole idea of, okay, yeah, this is great. Like now I'm going to get an alert if I happen to have been exposed and, you know, so on and so forth. But then you're right. Like this app is triangulating where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. Like, did I have 8 glasses of water that day? Like
How was
Am
my
I well
poop? Yeah.
hydrated?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
It's one
a
of
lot of
those things
stuff.
where like there's a lot of things that like this kind of data sharing is helpful, right? It
Yeah.
goes for the greater good. Similar to like the COVID tracking and for example, like neighborhood like security camera type of things. Like we're sharing our data and we're trying to keep ourselves safe. It's the other side of that though, right? Like it's the people that are like breaking into Nest cameras to be like, "Ooh, let me see if I can take advantage of this." And a lot of times it's harmless and it's like teenagers that are like, "Oh, look, I'm cool. I can hack into someone's security camera."
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's like, "Oh, well, I'm going to hack into your security camera so I can launch another type of attack somewhere else." And now you look like you're the one that's sent that attack virus malware because I've used your camera as this access point, or I've used your refrigerator, or I've used your anything that can be connected to the internet. And it's one of those things that we have so many things connected by convenience that we don't always realize what the convenience actually is. We're like, "Oh, well, let me go tell my refrigerator that I need to order blank today." Like your refrigerator should just really be keeping your stuff cold.
Yeah.
Like there's sometimes I see things and I'm like, "You have a water bottle that like will message your phone when you're like you haven't drank anymore? Like, can you just look at the water bottle and see if there's nothing left in it?"
No,
Like
no.
there's so many different touch points, and each touch
There
point
are.
has a surface for risk.
Yeah.
Regardless of what it is, whether it's an app, a water bottle, a refrigerator, a camera.
Yeah.
So
Keep refrigerators analog.
we were going whenever we go to Costco, there's one of those like LG ones that you knock and it's like a computer and it's pretty, and we're always like, "Oh, it's so pretty," and I'm like, "Yeah, but we couldn't have that in the house."
You're like, "Absolutely
no.
not." I can't live with that. I know too much.
Like, I can't do it. And it's funny because now, like, even talking with y'all, it reminds me of when I like first started in cybersecurity, and I was like, "Oh my god, everyone is so paranoid. Nothing is listening to us." And now I'm like, "Oh my god, I've turned into
Everything.
Literally everything's listening.
I was like, everything is connected.
Oh my god. I remember Aaron and I got, this was years ago, we got like the Pixel phones, and the promo that our carrier was running was we also got a free, like, what I don't know, it was the Google Dot or Home or whatever it was. And we ended up getting two because we both got phones, and both of us were like, "We're not plugging these in. I don't need anything listening to me in my house." And then both of us were like, "Our phones are already listening to us in our house." Like,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like when everyone's like, "Oh, well, I don't want to have like Facebook knowing what I'm doing or Instagram knowing what I'm doing. I don't want that." Like, your phone is literally something that is tracking you.
Yeah.
Regardless if you have a social media app open, closed, downloaded or not, like the device itself is still communicating through the internet to some endpoint about what it is you're doing, where you are, things like that.
Yeah.
A lot of it is encrypted, so it can't be like directly tied back to you until there is a point in that string that says like AG or anything else, and they're like, "Oh, got it, I got some initials, let's do some pairing." So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, even when we're talking about the fitness apps, right? And what you were just saying about the wearable that you had, Amanda, about how like now it gave you the information you needed, and now you're able to tell when you're sore and when you need a rest day. And I think that also speaks kind of into that intersection of, you know, how much we're able to be in touch with our own bodies and our own selves without a piece of electronics telling us to be.
Absolutely.
Marissa and I have talked about that on the podcast before about, you know, being able to tune into your body to figure out, do you need more movement today? Should you take a rest? And it's so hard for people to recognize that.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's where like the wearable initially comes in really useful, right? You get to learn a lot. I learned a lot that like on days that I was feeling tired, I was feeling mentally tired, but my body was still okay. So then I would go back and forth and those were usually like the second or fourth days of the week where I'm like slightly sore. My body's not like super tired, but I was like, okay, I can go for a workout. Then like the third day, I'm like, no, hard pass. I'm tired. I can't do
I'm
this.
done.
But learning that and then being able to see that pattern happen, I was like, okay, like I now feel that I know what I'm supposed to be feeling. I know how my body responds to these stressors. And I think as a whole, we've become very dependent on our technology to tell us things, right? We've kind of lost hearing our body's voice, our mind's voice, and we're like, oh, well, like my app tells me today's a rest day, so like today's a rest day, or I logged X amount of food in this, so like now I can be able to eat this, that, or the other. Instead of being like, am I actually hungry? Am I not? Do I want to move? And like we're relying almost on like a parental figure, like we've given our like wearables the like, can I go out and can I go have a play date with so and so, or like can I go to the gym today, or can I eat this? And that's how we're treating a lot of our technology, as opposed to us being like, I am giving this technology permission to have this information about me.
Yeah.
And taking control of the relationship, as opposed to being like, well, the technology knows everything about me, so it will tell me what I need to do.
So how does one go about breaking up with their wearable or taking a break from their wearable?
I would say write down what it is that you wanted to learn from the wearable, right? So if you wanted your wearable to teach you how to eat a better, well-rounded meals throughout the day, write that as a goal and keep that around with you. So like when you check into that wearable, are you learning about that? Is that wearable helping you track what you wanted it to track? If it's recovery, if it's movement, have those goals be there. And once you can see that wearable has either helped you achieve that goal or not, like that is the time to be like, okay, well, maybe today I'm going to do a day without it. And the best time to do this is when it runs out of battery, because I was like, oh, I'm not going to charge it. I'm just going to take it off and I'm not going to charge it tonight. And I did the first day and I was like, oh, look, I woke up and like, I feel it's day 4 of my week. And so I know that I feel good enough. I'm going to go to the gym today. And I went on my day like normal. And I found myself not even opening the app even out of a habit. I didn't open the app to be like, oh, I wonder what my score was today. And it was really interesting for me to see how quickly that reliance was broken. And then it was one of those things, like I see it sitting on my like dresser and I'm like, oh, well, like, do I like donate it back? Like, will they take it back? Like, it's kind of gross. The strap is a little like, has some like sweat crusted on it. Like it's got its use. But I think having a very clear understanding of why you're using the wearable is the key to using the wearable in a way that is effective and also breaking up with it or taking a break with it. Because once that goal has been achieved, like you don't necessarily need it anymore unless it is going to help you get to whatever your next goal is going to be.
Yeah, I think that's good points, good advice. I do feel that, there's a time and a place for the wearables, and there's a time and a place where, nutrition tracking can be really helpful. And
absolutely.
When there comes a point when you're like, I went for a walk today and I didn't wear my Fitbit. That walk didn't count.
Right.
Then that's like a time to be a little self-reflective of like, did it really not count? Or
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
am
And
I
I
not
think
getting that boost from seeing that data?
Right. Right. And that goes back to us kind of like selling our data for that serotonin boost, right? We're like, oh,
Yeah.
sweet. Like, I get the fireworks when I hit my goal step, or the whatever celebration for whatever milestone, whether it's like the likes on an Instagram post, or, you know, the fireworks when you hit your 10,000 steps on your Fitbit.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, sweet, we got rewarded for being alive today. Awesome.
Woo!
Yeah.
Because like at the end of the day, like life is a risk, right? We know at the end of the only thing that we're guaranteed in life is that we're gonna die. And so our
Right.
whole life is trying to like risk assess how much risk are we willing to take to be able to live life really well, so that when we get to the point that our life is over, we're like, we did great.
Yeah.
Instead of the opposite way around, right? And it's the same with security. How much of our data and privacy are we willing to kind of play around with on that risk management, so we can live our lives in today's society without necessarily putting ourselves into that risk and like super risky quadrant of being like, we are doing shady shit with our data for a serotonin boost. Like, we shouldn't be doing shady stuff for our serotonin boost with our data. We should be having that nice healthy seesaw there so that we can give and take.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say that like a good like standard means of operation is for folks to utilize their technology, assuming that more data than they think is available to other people?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I would have people assume that anything that they are posting on any app can and will be probably viewed by lots and lots of other people.
Yeah.
And could potentially be exposed to people that have no right knowing that information.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same way that, like, I was thinking about this morning because I was like, what am I going to say? And I was like, well, here I am walking the dog, and like, I am operating under the assumption that me on a sidewalk, a car is not going to come and hit me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm on a sidewalk with my dog, but a car could come and hit me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, like, that is the same type of risk that we're taking with a lot of these social media apps, right?
Yeah.
Is someone going to steal my data? Maybe. It's a possibility. And you could be as safe as you possibly can wearing your neon vest on a sidewalk, and out of somewhere, a car can come, right?
Yeah.
Or anything can come and be like, we're out.
Yeah.
Like this, there's a very big vulnerability here.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the risks that we take, right? We don't think about it when we go walk the dog. We're like, oh, I'll go walk the dog. I'll be back in a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go drive to the grocery store. Like, there are little risks that we take that every day that we don't think about anymore because they're normal risks. We take the risks to enhance our life. And it's similar with our data online, right?
Yeah.
We decide where our barrier to risk is and what we're going to do day to day. And for some people, that means like they put all their information out there because they're like, what's the worst that's gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say that's wrong or right. It's everyone's personal kind of risk decision that they get to take when we all get to connect together on the internet.
Yes.
Like right now.
Yes,
exactly.
I love that analogy so much. It's like the sidewalk is like using a strong password and being selective in what data you log on electronics.
Right? You
like
throw on a neon vest and you've got the VPN on there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like posting everything and having the same password for every website. It's like walking in the middle of the road. It's like, I like that.
And sometimes that's okay, right? Sometimes like you get away with it for a little bit until a car comes flying up and honks their horn and you got to jump or move.
Yep.
But yeah, that one, if anyone can take anything away from anything that I ever say, is to like, please never reuse your passwords. Like, please just do everyone a little tiny favor.
I'm just gonna go in and change my passwords now.
I know.
And I know it's hard, and I know it's like one of those things that we all like roll our eyes on and being like, our password needs like the blood of a unicorn, my firstborn child, like all of these things. And it's funny because like the sidewalk is that password. Like that is like it. Like that is the first barrier that if an attacker can't figure out your email and your password together, like you have put yourself at the bottom of the people that they're going to try to piece together all the pieces. Like if they're having too much trouble trying to match your credentials, like they're going to be like, okay, eventually we'll get there, but we're not going to focus on this person.
We'll move on. Yeah. I mean, I can't even figure out my password, so I feel like I'm in pretty good shape.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point. I did a cybersecurity training with my school district and last spring, and changed all my passwords on everything. And now when I get logged out of something, I'm like, I have no idea. No idea.
No idea. Yeah.
So
it's when the like forgot password and I become real good friends, but I'm like, crap, I just changed it.
Yeah.
Did I put it down somewhere? Where did that go?
Mm-hmm. And then you go to change it and it's like, can't reuse a password. And you're like, son of a bitch.
That was a good one too.
It's too late now. Yeah. So Amanda, what kinds of things do you have coming up? I know you teach at a number of places up here on the North Shore. Any special events or classes or anything you want folks to know about after we've already talked about cybersecurity, not giving away your location?
Well, on October 5th, I am headed back to Tall Ships in Boston. I'm partnering with Salty Buddha again for our third time there with Move Studio Boston. We're doing a Healing Beats and Salty Signature Flow class right on the water. So cool. Tickets are available on Move Studios website, and you can find them on I'll throw the link in my Instagram bio as well. But we'll be there at 7:00, and I think that we'll be close to the close of the Tall Ships. If you haven't been to Tall Ships, like it's a really cool location if you're in the Boston area. And if you don't live in like Metro Boston, they have $15 valet, which like saves my life when I park in East Boston.
$15 for valet in Boston?
For valet in Boston.
That's unheard of.
So
jeez,
it's a fun time. But that's the big one. The rest you can see me a couple of nights throughout the week up here for yoga and for CrossFit, but that's a big event.
Excellent. And we can put that link in our show notes too.
Perfect.
Get some folks there too.
Well,
man, they're going to like cancel that valet now that you've told the world about it.
Oh my God. It's the best thing. It's just for Tall Ships also. So like I think it's $15 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then it goes up to like $25 for the rest of it. And I'm like,
that's still dirt cheap.
Take my money.
Boston.
Take my money.
Yeah.
The first time I went, I was like, are you sure it's $15? I was like, yeah, I'm not going to go search East Boston for parking. Not happening.
Is this a trick?
Like, here you go.
Are you going to steal my car?
Right? No, I don't have to worry about anyone stealing my little tiny dirty car. I'll open that door and be like, hard pass. This is a fitness instructor's vehicle.
Oh man, I totally sympathize with that. It's great.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
For having me.
Yeah. Oh, and if folks want to find you on social media.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How can they find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram at Amanda_Goedde, which is Goedde. And that's where I post most of my stuff. I'll be posting more of a mix of cybersecurity and fitness. It's been interesting kind of weaving it in because it was one of those things where I'm like, do people really care? Do people care? I do this day in, day out. And so it was really cool to see the support around it being like, oh, I didn't know this. I didn't know about this. So it reminds me not to take a lot of that stuff I do full time for a full advantage, right? Because I'm like, oh, this is my bread and butter, not necessarily everyone else's. So time to
Yeah.
send it to the world.
So cool. I
Aw.
love it. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. This was fantastic. We'll link
Thank
your
you.
Instagram in the show notes as well. And yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Hey.